Are you considering adding ruffles to a project but you don't know where to start? Maybe you're concerned about cutting too many or too few strips of fabric. Well, I can help. My name is Melissa Case from Hat to Hem, and today I'm going to show you how I calculate my ruffles. For this you'll need a ruler, either a rotary cutter or scissors, or both if that's what you want to do, something to write with, paper, the fabric you'll be making your ruffles out of, and your project. You'll also need the formula. I've been using this formula for so long that it's written on the back of the paper I used back when I was a waitress at Friendly's. So it's 11 years old, give or take. So clearly it's been very well tested at this point. First, you want to decide how tight you want your ruffles. Here are a few examples, but for this project I'm going to go with 1.5. You also want to measure how long wherever you're putting these ruffles are. So it could be around the hem of a skirt, or it could be a little bit higher. It's up to you, but just make sure you have that number. For this example, let's say the skirt is 100 inches around. For the width of the ruffle, you want to include whatever seam allowance you're going to do with the hem and at the top. So for this example, let's say it's 4 inches. Alright, so we have 5 things we need to find here. So my formulas always have a lot of letters, so let's talk about what the letters are before we even start. First off, we're going to have L, which is going to be the length of the skirt for the ruffle. Again, mine is going to be 100. We're going to need to find G, which is the length with the gathered allowance. We're going to need to find S for strips. Then we have R for width of the ruffle. In this case, it's going to be 4. And then we have Y for yardage, which is pretty much why we're doing all this to begin with. Alright, so here's the first equation we need to solve. It's 2L times 1.5 equals G. If you decided to have a more dense ruffle, it won't be 1.5 for you. It might be 2, it might be 2.5. It's whatever you decided on. Next, we're going to take G and we're going to divide by the width of the fabric, but we're going to not include whatever seam allowance there's going to be. So even if the fabric is 60 inches long, I'm going to say it's 56 inches, so I have 2 inches of extra on the ends. Anyway, it'll be G divided by, in this case, 56 equals S. After that, we're going to take S and we're going to multiply it by R. We're going to get X, and then we're going to take whatever that X ends up being and divide it by 36, which is because there are 36 inches in a yard, and that's going to give us our yardage. Okay, that was a lot. Let me show you how it actually works. So we're going to take that first equation and we're going to replace L with 100. 2 times 100 is 200. 200 times 1.5 is 300. So G equals 300. 300 divided by 56 is 5.357. I think that's a weird number. I'm going to round that up to the nearest half. So that would be 5.5. There's a lot of rounding up with this process because, again, it's better to have too much than too little. If you want, you can round up to like the nearest quarter or another number that makes sense to you. I think doing it by half is really easy to keep track of. And it's not going to add so much length that the ruffle becomes just completely unyieldy, so 5.5 it is. So you're going to need to cut out 5.5 strips of fabric for this ruffle. For the sake of the math, I'm going to take the 5.5 and I'm going to round it up to the nearest whole number. That's because even though I only need 5.5 strips of fabric, that's going to be very difficult to cut out. So I'm going to cut enough fabric for 6 strips, even if I only use half of one of them. Alright, so now we're going to replace S with 6, and we're going to multiply that by the ruffle width, which is 4. 6 times 4 is 24, so this fabric has to be 24 inches long to get 6 strips out of it. Now you can stop there, but if you need to buy the fabric for the ruffles, you're going to want to do the next step, which is finding the yardage. And then we're going to take that 24 and we're going to divide it by 36 inches. And we get 0.6 repeating, or 0.667, which actually works out really well because 0.667 is exactly 2/3 of a yard. Now that we have our numbers, you want to cut out the number of strips you got earlier. If they're cut salvage to salvage, you likely won't have to finish the edges, at least for the full length ruffles. If you have one ruffle that you have to kind of cut shorter, you're going to want to finish off the unfinished edge. Now is a good time to finish the top and bottom. It's so much easier to do this when the ruffle is laying flat. Next, you want to row 2 rows of gathering stitches along the top. You do this by lengthening your stitch length and loosening your tension. This will make the fabric just slide along the bobbin threads when you pull it up later. For the sake of your sanity, plan gaps in the stitches. It's so much easier to deal with the gathering in smaller sections rather than this entire ring of fabric. I usually stop at the quarter marks because that's what makes sense in my brain. Now to get this giant ring of fabric onto the dress. I usually start by pinning the ruffle to the center front, center back, and sides of the skirt. Then I'll pin the ruffle again between those marks at the center between those pins. You can repeat this as many times as you're comfortable. Now you can pull the bobbin threads to gather up the ruffle. Try to make sure the gathers are distributed evenly. All that's left is to sew the ruffle to the skirt and you're done. I hope this tutorial helped you. If it did, give it a like and let me know in the comments. Thank you to my patrons on Patreon for making this video possible, and I'll see you next time. Bye!